On the 15th of October, 1957, a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Villas-Boas claimed that while plowing his fields at night to avoid the heat, he noticed a red glowing object in the sky that would soon prove to be an alien spacecraft filled with humanoid creatures who subdued and abducted him. A story that was widely dismissed as a hoax. In 1961, an American couple, Betty and Barney Hill, made a similar claim, stating that they had been abducted by extraterrestrials from a rural portion of the state of New Hampshire. Their story, although largely debunked, has received considerable attention and has been adapted into a best-selling book called The Interrupted Journey and a television film, The UFO Incident. On the 2nd of May, 1970, a farmer named Hank Butler from Middleton, Idaho, also claimed to have made contact with humanoid creatures from another planet. And although his tale is not as widely known as some of the other more notorious alien abductions, it does have features that make it stand out from most of the other accounts of extraterrestrial visitations, and the sometimes lurid details have been well chronicled by the man at the center of the controversy himself. Henry Bartholomew Butler was 40 years old in 1970 and lived alone on a small farm in Canyon County, Idaho. He was known in the community as a sober, hard-working, church-going man who rarely stood out in a crowd or sought attention. That is why it was so surprising to his neighbors when he began telling them about his experiences with alien beings, especially when he provided them with rather graphic details of some of the more outlandish aspects of his encounters. Another thing that makes Hank's story so compelling is that he documented his experiences on tape after each encounter, and later had a sketch artist produce drawings that simulated what he had seen. These sketches and tapes will figure prominently in the telling of his story. According to Hank, his initial encounter was similar to that which Antonio Villas-Boas had experienced, in that he saw a strange light in the sky over his farm and went to investigate. He witnessed a round spacecraft landing on his fields and felt frozen in place as various humanoid creatures approached him.
They came right up to me and started talking, although they didn't need to move their lips. I just knew what they were saying, and they kept talking a bunch of gibberish about knocking bottles down and whatnot, until I finally figured out that they was talking about bowling. For some reason, they wanted me to teach them how to do it. So I agreed to set something up in my barn if they wanted to come back in a week or so. Then they got in their ship and took off, and I didn't see them for about 10 days and figured maybe they wasn't coming back. But I went ahead and put some pins up and laid down some planks, and sure enough, they came back and I gave them some lessons.
This extraterrestrial interest in human recreational activity has struck some observers as quite significant, in that it implies that life on Earth is being monitored in some way, and that an attempt to assimilate into human culture was a positive sign of the peaceful intent of these visitors from outer space, while others have felt that the narrative stretches credibility. On their next visit, Hank was allegedly taken inside their craft and given a brief tour before being strapped to an examination table, where he was subjected to a number of tests and general analyses.
People always ask about the anal probe, and yeah, they did it. I'm not going to lie about it. I don't have a damn idea why they did it, but they did a lot of poking and prodding and hooking me up to things. I guess they wanted to know what makes us Earth folks tick. Afterwards, we had a couple of beers, and they seemed like okay guys to me, but It might have been easier for me if they had given me the beers first and then done the probe.
According to Hank, his otherworldly visitors made frequent appearances over the next several months. Allegedly, they took him for a ride in their spacecraft once, and he let them drive his tractor. Much of the time, they played poker and drank beer, although he was occasionally subjected to additional probing and testing. Even so, he came to look forward to their visits, as he had no real social life of his own, and his new friends knew how to party, as he put it in the journal he began to keep of his experiences. The first time Hank mentioned his strange encounters to anyone was to Darlene Wilkinson, the owner of a local liquor store, who became concerned about the rather large volume of beer that Hank had been purchasing, since he was known to be a moderate drinker at best. Hank's explanation that he was hosting a variety of extraterrestrial visitors who were fond of beer was dismissed as a joke, and not wanting to lose such a large order, Wilkinson decided not to press the issue.
I wasn't trying to hide anything from anybody, but I was afraid that people might not believe me, would think I was crazy or drunk or something, so I kept it to myself for a long time. But then they stopped coming for a while, and I sort of missed those guys. I went bowling a lot, and I drank a lot of beers, but it wasn't the same. I got kind of depressed and lonely, I guess. That's when I started traveling to Boise and picking up prostitutes and gambling at the racetrack. But it just wasn't the same.
It was the local pastor, Martin Deeks, who became concerned about Hank's apparent melancholy and his absence from church, which prompted a visit to Hank's farm. He was shocked by the improvised bowling alley, the crude drawings of aliens and flying saucers, and the piles of empty beer bottles that littered the property. Hank broke down and confessed his whole story to the pastor, and played him the tapes he had recorded. Deeks encouraged the farmer to notify the local authorities about his alleged encounters, and suggested that he return to the church instead of seeking solace in the pursuit of gratuitous pleasure. It was as a result of that conversation that the incident in Middleton would enter the annals of extraterrestrial encounters. Hank was interviewed by the local police and visited by a member of the United States military. It was at that time that a local artist, Sarah Porter, was engaged to provide sketches based on Hank's eyewitness accounts, but her renderings were deemed to be too fanciful to be credible depictions of the events as described to her. So she was replaced with a commercial sketch artist named Norm Kimberly, whose drawings provided a more technical representation of the alleged events. Aside from the bowling paraphernalia and the copious amounts of empty beer bottles, no physical evidence could be produced to verify Hank's narrative. Even the damage done to his tractor was easily dismissed as a drunken escapade and not the result of alien joyriding.
I know folks don't believe me, but I saw what I saw, and I did what I did, and nothing is ever going to make me think otherwise. I don't know where them fellas came from or why they came here, but I'm glad they did. Gives me kind of a feeling of hope, I guess, that there's folks out there just like us who like to blow off a little steam and have a good time, and maybe they even learned something from all that probing they'd done. But if they was ever to come back, I'd go with them if they asked me.
That is the final recording that Hank is known to have made. Having become somewhat of a laughingstock in his community, Hank eventually sold his farm and moved away, although his whereabouts after leaving Middleton are shrouded in mystery. For a short time, The new owners of his property tried to cash in on the growing UFO phenomenon by offering guided tours and a chance to participate in alien bowling. But it didn't prove to be a prosperous venture, and soon the land was returned to the pursuit of growing potatoes. As for Hank, there are those who, perhaps romantically, believe that his alien friends did appear again and took him away to some far-off corner of the galaxy. But there is some evidence to suggest that he changed his name to Jonas Mendelssohn and died in a car accident in Casper, Wyoming in 1988. Never the most believable tale of alien abduction, the story of Hank Butler has nonetheless remained on the fringe of dedicated UFO research for some time. And thanks to the tapes and drawings he left behind, the incident in Middleton will likely always remain a colorful chapter in the history of potential extraterrestrial encounters.